They expected surrender. They got a warning shot. December 1944. By this point in the war, the Western Front no longer existed as a clean line on a map. It was a moving collapse, villages abandoned overnight, flooded roads, frozen forests, and exhausted men advancing one hedgerow at a time. American units pushing through eastern France toward the German border were no longer meeting organized resistance everywhere. In many places, the war simply stopped. White flags appeared in windows, rifles were left in doorways, entire units surrendered without a fight. But not here. Outside a half-destroyed town near the Saar region, an American infantry company halted at the edge of a narrow road lined with leafless trees and burned-out wagons. Recon patrols had reported a small German rearguard element holding a cluster of stone farm buildings ahead. No artillery fire, no visible movement, just silence. Silence in late 1944 almost never meant safety. A squad was sent forward cautiously. The men expected either nothing or a quick surrender. Instead, a single rifle shot cracked through the cold air, striking the dirt near their feet. Then another, controlled, deliberate. The squad pulled back immediately. The company commander sent a runner forward. The Germans were still there, and someone was clearly in charge. Through binoculars, an American lieutenant caught a brief glimpse of him. He stood in the doorway of the largest building. Long coat, field cap pulled low, pistol holstered, binoculars hanging from his neck. He wasn't shouting orders. He wasn't firing wildly. He was watching. Earlier that day, captured prisoners had mentioned him in passing. A major, older, a veteran of the Eastern Front, an officer who had already decided how this would end. A loudspeaker was brought up. A German-speaking corporal was ordered to call out. The message was simple. By the book. You are surrounded. Lay down your arms. You will be treated according to the Geneva Convention. There was a pause. Then a single rifle shot fired straight into the air. Nothing else. The Americans waited, then called again. Louder this time, more explicit. The response finally came back in German. Calm, almost polite. The major refused. He stated that he was an officer of the German army. His orders were to delay the enemy. He would not surrender his position. No insults, no threats. Just a statement of fact. The lieutenant lowered his binoculars and looked at the men around him. They were soaked, cold, and exhausted. Some had been moving for nearly 72 hours with almost no rest. No one wanted a firefight over a farm that no longer mattered strategically. But the road did. Higher command was notified. The reply came back quickly. Do not bypass. Do not leave a hostile force in your rear. Resolve it. Mortars were brought up, but not fired. The company commander hesitated. By late 1944, many officers had learned that not every problem had to be solved with immediate violence. One more attempt was made. A white cloth was tied to a stick. An unarmed American non-commissioned officer walked halfway down the road, hands visible, and stopped at a safe distance. He called out again. This time, the German major stepped fully into view. He did not raise his weapon. He listened. The NCO repeated the terms: medical care, food, warmth, survival. The major answered slowly. He said his men were exhausted, that they had no illusions about victory. But surrender for him was not a tactical calculation. It was personal. He had already retreated too far, already yielded too much ground. He would not retreat again. The NCO asked how many men he still commanded. The major didn't answer. Instead, he asked his own question. How much time will you give us? The NCO returned to the company commander and relayed the exchange. The commander listened, then made a decision that surprised several men around him. He gave them 1 hour to reconsider, 1 hour before the Americans advanced. The order was passed quietly. Rifles were set down. Mortar crews waited without loading rounds. The minutes dragged. At the 40-minute mark, there was movement. A young German soldier stepped out from a side building, hands raised. He walked toward the American line, shaking. From the cold, the fear, or both. He said the major had dismissed him, told him to surrender if he wished. No one would stop him. Within minutes, 2 more followed, then another. None of them were shot. The Americans waved them through, searched them, and wrapped them in spare blankets. When the hour expired, the major was still standing in the doorway. The assault began. It was brief, controlled, overwhelming. Machine gun fire pinned the windows. Mortars landed behind the buildings, not to destroy them but to cut off retreat. Infantry advanced in short rushes using stone walls and ditches for cover. The Germans fired back, but weakly. Ammunition was low. The resistance was symbolic rather than effective. Within 15 minutes, it was over. Smoke drifted through the yard. One German soldier lay wounded but alive, calling out for help. An American medic moved to him immediately, without waiting for orders. The major was found inside the main building. He sat at a wooden table. His pistol lay unloaded beside him. His gloves had been removed carefully and placed next to it. When the Americans entered, he stood. He did not raise his hands until asked. The American lieutenant stood in front of him, mud-streaked, breathing hard, and waited. The lieutenant finally spoke. He told the major the fighting was over, that his men were safe, that the wounded were already being treated, that no one else needed to die here. The major nodded once. He did not argue. He did not protest. He simply acknowledged the fact, as if this outcome had been decided long before the first shot was fired. He handed over his papers, straightened his coat, and followed the Americans outside. In the yard, his remaining soldiers stood quietly, fewer than anyone had expected. Tired faces, mud-caked boots, men who had already survived too much war to believe in last stands anymore. They were counted, searched, fed. And then something unusual happened. The major asked to speak privately with the American company commander. Through an interpreter, he explained his refusal to surrender earlier. He said that on the Eastern Front, surrender often meant execution, starvation, or disappearance. He had watched officers who trusted promises vanish within days. For him, surrender had never been a neutral option, but this time was different. The treatment his men received, immediate medical care, food, warmth, showed him something he had not expected, that the war, at least here, was ending under different rules. Nearly 20,000 German soldiers would surrender to American forces in that region over the following days. Many of them cited similar reasons. Not defeat, not fear, but certainty. Certainty that surrender would not mean death. This was one of the largest quiet capitulations of the war. No flags raised over cities, no victory parades, just men laying down their weapons and walking out alive. Later reports would note that not a single American soldier had been killed in the engagement. No German civilians were harmed. An entire rearguard position was removed from the battlefield without a prolonged fight. The road was cleared, the advance continued, and the major, a man who had sworn he would not retreat again, survived the war not because he fought to the last, but because he was given the space to choose when to stop. In December 1944, that decision mattered. Not because it changed the course of the war, but because it proved that even at the end, how you fight can decide how the war ends for everyone involved. The lieutenant studied him for a long moment, then spoke through an interpreter. "Why didn't you surrender when you had the chance?" The major answered without hesitation. He said surrender, in his view, had to be earned, not requested. That an officer's duty was to resist until resistance no longer had meaning. That he wanted his men to see he did not abandon his post lightly, even when the outcome was already clear. The lieutenant nodded. He had heard versions of this explanation before. Some came from conviction, others from pride. He didn't argue. He ordered the major searched and escorted outside. What followed surprised more than one man watching. The major was not shoved or humiliated. No one tore his insignia from his coat. An American offered him a cigarette. He refused at first, then accepted it quietly. There was no shouting, no spectacle. One enlisted man noticed the major's boots were soaked through and, without saying a word, gestured toward a fire barrel where prisoners were allowed to warm themselves under guard. The major hesitated, then walked over, standing in silence among the other captured soldiers. During processing, more details emerged. He had served since before the war began. He had fought on the Eastern Front. He had lost a son there. By that night, he no longer believed in victory, only in finishing his duty in a way he could live with. He was fed the same rations as the American soldiers guarding him, treated no differently, no worse, no better. Later, an intelligence officer asked him a final question. "Do you regret refusing to surrender earlier?" The major paused for a long moment before answering. He said he regretted the delay, not the decision. He said the Americans had proven something to him that night, Not by force, not by destruction, but by restraint, by giving time when they could have taken it away. In official reports, the incident barely appeared at all. A brief resistance, several prisoners taken, no American casualties. In the scale of World War II, it was insignificant. But for the men who stood there in the cold, it stayed with them. They remembered the officer who chose resistance even when it no longer changed the outcome. They remembered the decision to wait rather than destroy, to offer time instead of immediate violence. And they remembered that surrender, like refusal, was not always about ideology or loyalty. Sometimes it was about dignity, and sometimes the way a war ends matters as much as how it is fought. If stories like this matter to you, take a moment to like the video. It helps keep these quieter moments of history from being forgotten. And if you're watching, leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Thank you for watching.